Our next one is pacing analysis. So the first two were pretty rudimentary. That's something I think people do before they even consider themselves a revenue manager. And those people who are revenue managers continue to do them. Once we get into the pacing analysis, we're getting into deeper revenue management activities. And so this is one that might take a little practice and also be a little confusing at first. Pacing analysis is similar to the new booking analysis in its concept. You're essentially looking at your sales and trying to assess where there is compression. Compression is a hotel term that basically indicates that there's high demand on a date and it's likely to sell out. It results in higher rates. What you're looking for is opportunities in your portfolio to really push your rate because you're seeing sales. You're also looking for vacancy gaps. And the goal of pacing analysis is to have a visualization that allows you to see all this at once. When you're looking at a reservation list for the new booking analysis, you're really focused in on the individual reservation. It's very hard to see where those reservations are landing on the calendar and how many of them actually might be occurring for the same day. When you start building a pacing analysis, the goal is to have a visualization that shows all of your stayed on room nights or reservations and also highlight those sales. Now, this kind of level up from new booking analysis to pacing analysis is really important as you scale. When you're working with 10 or 15, 20 units, maybe even 50 units, you can keep track of those individual reservations and you can treat units individually. Once you start getting into the hundreds of units range, you don't have the time to do that. You need to be able to make decisions in the group level. Now, the benefit of that too is you also have enough data to make decisions in aggregate and actually extrapolate demand and get ahead of what's going on, where in an individual listing, if something's sold, it's already sold. Assuming that you have a visualization to do this, this process is going to, one, it takes practice to see, but once you have the practice, you can very, very quickly identify trends across your entire portfolio. The goal would also to be have the ability to filter down into smaller groups and very quickly identify the areas that you want to focus on as a revenue management because you see more opportunity. Whether that opportunity is driving occupancy because your portfolio is pacing behind or just not as occupied as you would like, or because sales are occurring really quickly. Another thing to note here is the first part of pacing analysis is really monitoring your own portfolio's pace. As you get more sophisticated, you can also start to overlay additional data points. One of those data points is going to be last year data or same time last year. So where you were as of the same period last year. Another good piece of data would be market data. How are you doing compared to the market? And if you have a good visualization for pacing analysis, you're going to be able to access all of that data there. Now, this is a really key revenue management process. If you're really looking to become a revenue manager, I would say you need some sort of pacing analysis and should be doing it once, if not twice a week, and actually spending a pretty good amount of time on this. This is probably the crux of where you're going to do a lot of revenue management because for you, this is your radar. This is how you identify where opportunities are. This is how you be proactive about changing your strategy or applying tactics to really succeed in the marketplace. So what does this look like? Luckily, I mentioned, you need a visualization to really be able to do this. It is possible to build these visualizations in Excel. I do have an example in another slide show that I will make available to you guys. But if you are a Wheelhouse user, huge benefit here, we provide this visualization for you. This first one I'm going to show you is an example of pacing analysis in Wheelhouse, and we're doing it at the monthly level right here. Okay? And what it's going to show is if you look at the bottom x-axis, I have all of the date ranges. Right now, we're looking at occupancy, so that y-axis is the occupancy level for each of these months. The purple is this year. The green is where we were as of this time last year. And one thing to keep in mind is this is all stayed on occupancy. So we're not saying in September I sold 40% occupancy for any date. What I'm saying is that right now I am 40% occupied in September. Then the last piece here, so this is where it gets complicated, it takes some practice as well, is you see that there's these highlights on the bars. Not only are we showing you that you are 41% occupied for October, but we're also highlighting and saying, hey, 8% of that occupancy was sold in the last 2 weeks. So you get 3 elements here. Where are people staying? How recently did they book that? And where were you either last year or compared to the market or compared to the same time last year in the green? Another benefit here is you can see that I'm actually looking at quite a bit of data all at the same time. So in one visualization, not only do I see a few things, and I'll point them out to you. One, I'm pacing behind in September. I'm not as occupied as I was at this time last year, but I am selling about the same way, which means if I need to catch up, I actually need to pump my sales. I'm selling more than I was selling for October stays, and I'm higher. Maybe that's an opportunity for me to raise the rates there because I'm on track to really do much better. I can also see out here that there's not really any booking activity further on the calendar. Maybe I'm fine with that in my booking window. If there was, maybe I'd actually want to look into that because it's booking too early. And I'm a little bit behind, but it's very negligible, so I barely had anything last year. At its root, a visualization like this tells you a lot of information. It does take a lot of time to get used to looking at it, but once you do, you'll be able to see trends just at a glance. And that's how I can read pretty much anyone's portfolio performance in the matter of, even on a call that I'm having with somebody. Now, let's go one step deeper. Before, I was showing you a monthly level, and that's really helpful. But you all know that sometimes when you're looking at monthly sales and occupancy, you could be looking at the month of October and say, hey, I'm doing really great. But when you actually look at the calendar, you've sold out one weekend, but the rest of the days are available. You can't just go in and make decisions at the monthly level. I couldn't say, hey, I'm doing well in October, I'm going to raise every date by 10%, because that sold out date doesn't matter anymore. You missed the opportunity, and all the other dates that aren't selling, you might actually be making the rate too high. So the next kind of phase from going from monthly is to actually take this to the weekly or even daily level. And frankly, I prefer the daily level. I think it is the best place to make decisions. It does take the most practice to look at because it is very complicated. But once you get used to seeing the shapes and the trends, you'll be able to identify a lot of information quickly. Right here, I have an example of this at the daily level. And just a quick reminder, if you are using Wheelhouse, you have access to this visualization at the daily level for any group of listings in your portfolio. All you have to do is go to our performance page and filter down to it. Now, at first glance, this is going to be a lot more complicated to look at. So I'll point out a few of those trends that I pointed out before so that you can start to see what the practice in doing this will result in. September, we were pacing behind. Well, what's really interesting here, when I look at the green versus the purple, is that we're pacing behind because these dates in the short term, around September 9th, those are the dates we're pacing behind. But we're not pacing behind on every day. We're actually pacing ahead on the 17th, and we're selling on the 17th. That tells me a few things. Maybe the demand shifted, and I don't have too much to be concerned about. Maybe I have opportunities because I am selling well here. And also, I'm not selling on this date that's behind, so maybe that rate needs to come down. So already at a glance, I went from September's pacing behind to there are 3 date ranges with 3 different tactical approaches that I could take to improve my revenue. If I jump over here to October, you recall October was ahead and also selling a lot. I think the most interesting thing here is we're pretty much ahead for almost the first 2/3 of October, and even a little ahead on the last week. In addition, we're selling across every date. So for me, what this is saying is it's not just a few dates driving this pacing. I'm actually just consistently selling. And that tells me maybe I can maybe I'm a little underpriced. Maybe I need to check how my ADRs are. Am I selling too low? But it really does apply to the whole month. So it could be a little bit broader than just like an event or something happening there. Now, the last piece I want to talk to you about pacing analysis is the visualization is helping you to identify where you might make a decision. The actual implementation of the decisions has to occur somewhere else. And that's honestly going to be your tape chart or wherever you go to change the rates. So normally what I would do when I'm doing a pacing analysis is if you have 2 screens, it's great, but pull up the pacing analysis on one screen, pull up your tape chart or where you change rates on another screen, and then just go group by group. That's a key point is you do it helps to look at the whole portfolio, but then you want to break it down. So if I'm looking at all of my units in one market and say, okay, here's the trends, then I'm going to pull up just the 1 bedrooms, see if the trends are different. I'm going to pull up just the 2 bedrooms, see if the trends are different. While I'm going through all that, I'll write down those date ranges and groups. Say like 1 bedrooms, hey, these are the date ranges, plus these ones go up. I think these ones need to go down. Go next to the 2 bedrooms, write down, hey, these date ranges are actually doing this. And when I have a full list of what date ranges I think I have opportunities on, that's when I'm going to go switch over to my where I make rate changes and go ahead and just implement those changes. If you don't have a good heuristic for how much you should change things, I would say start in increments of like 10%. But over time, you'll develop your own heuristics where you kind of know what price ranges that you want to put things in when you're trying to kind of beat the market. Now, if you're using Wheelhouse, obviously making those changes is really easy. There's a couple other things that you can do here too to further fine tune. So keep in mind this pacing analysis is always looking at things at the group level. You're still going to have within that group listings that are performing differently. So if I've decided, hey, I'm going to go change some prices for dates in October, you can pull up your 2 bedrooms, go to October, and then add KPIs onto your tape chart. So I have KPIs like my historical occupancy. I have KPIs like the future occupancy. I have KPIs like how many, what my sales volume has been in that listing. And I might sort by those to further fine tune my strategy. From the pacing analysis, my decision is I'm going to raise October by 10 or 15%. Well, when I sort by my sales volume, I might find that, hey, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 listings that even though the whole group is doing well, they haven't sold anything. And of those, I can correlate, this one's kind of low occupancy. These 2 are very low occupancy. Maybe I'm going to exempt them from the rate raise because they're not doing as well, even though the whole group is doing well. Furthermore, I may even make an opposite decision. I'm going to raise everything else, but those ones I'm going to drop because they're just doing poorly and I want to get them booked. Using the portfolio KPIs, you can further fine tune what you identify at the group level and start getting an extremely granular revenue management tactical strategy without having to spend a million years trying to actually identify and calculate these opportunities. Final piece here is you do want to leave notes. If you're going to start interacting with your portfolio and making micro changes to try to beat the market, it does mean you do need to follow up on them. If you're using Wheelhouse, you can add those notes directly into the system. You can add them to the listings base rates. You can also add them to the specific days, as well as put reminders in. And I highly recommend you do that for important changes. If you're looking at your pacing and saying, hey, maybe I can really push the rate 20% here, go ahead and put a note in saying, I saw that we were pacing super far ahead on this date. I'm going to try to push the rate and then set a reminder to check it in a week or 2. That way you don't accidentally leave a change in place and then risk, just forgetting about it. If you don't want to use the notes in Wheelhouse, another thing that I recommend doing is just start a Word doc and create a journal. So every time you do this activity, you just write down all those dates and notes and optimizations you're making. I did suggest that when you're actually doing the pacing analysis, you write them down. So it already kind of goes hand in hand. If you have them written down, just keep them in a document. Some people also will take the pictures of the pacing analysis, write their notes, and send that as a report to other team members so they know what you're doing and what you're thinking. Final kind of thing you can do if you have really important changes that you don't want to lose track of is just go ahead and put Google Calendar invites on your calendar as reminders. So, if you have a change that you want to check in a month or maybe even 2 months, just throw it on your calendar. You can kind of forget about it. And then when you wake up that morning and you're looking, you're like, what the heck does that mean? And it says, go check these listings for these dates. You'll be like, oh, that's right. Especially if you also left a note.